I almost quit my job because of my boss, and somehow ended up on top. I used to think that being a good employee meant putting up with anything. Late nights, impossible deadlines, criticism that felt more like a personal attack than constructive feedback. I swallowed it all until I met my boss, Dana Crawford. From day one, I could tell she thrived on control. But at first, I chalked it up to her being passionate about the company. Passionate, I later realized, was her polite word for ruthlessness. I work at a marketing firm in New York City. A small, high-pressure company, where every project feels like a make-or-break moment. Harper, my coworker, is one of the few people who makes the office bearable. She's smart, unflappable, and the kind of person who can calm me down when Dana's yelling across the room. My first week under Dana's management was fine. Almost normal even. But by the second week, the cracks started to show. She would assign tasks with unrealistic deadlines, then berate anyone who didn't meet them immediately. I remember one morning vividly. "Levi, I need those campaign analytics yesterday." Dana snapped during a team meeting, her eyes scanning like a hawk, daring someone to blink. "If you can't manage that, maybe this isn't the right position for you." It was the kind of comment designed to make me question my entire career. I forced a smile and nodded, muttering, "Yes, Dana, I'll get it done." By lunchtime, I realized she wasn't just tough, she was manipulative. She'd publicly praise Harper for her work, but find some tiny mistake in mine, and make it seem like the biggest failure imaginable. I could see Harper's subtle nods of encouragement when Dana wasn't looking, but it wasn't enough to counteract the stress. One day, Dana called me into her office. "Levi," she began, leaning back in her chair with that calculated calm she always wears, "I noticed your presentation last week was underwhelming. Tell me, what happened?" I tried to explain that the dataset I'd been given was incomplete, that I had requested updated figures days before, but she didn't want an explanation. She wanted someone to blame. "I don't want excuses," she said, tapping her pen against her desk. "I want results." It wasn't just that she was demanding, it was the way she made it personal. Every mistake felt like a moral failure in her eyes. Every question I asked was a sign of incompetence. I'd go home at night with a tightness in my chest, feeling like I'd run a marathon I hadn't trained for. Harper was the only one who noticed. One evening, she grabbed my arm as we were leaving the office. "Levi, you're drowning yourself trying to swim in her storm," she said. "You need to set boundaries before she'll chews you up completely." I laughed, bitterly. Boundaries? With Dana? She'd think I was incompetent in 5 seconds if I did that. Harper shook her head. "You don't have to let her define your worth. But you do have to stand up for yourself at some point. Otherwise, this isn't sustainable." Her words stuck with me, though I didn't act immediately. I kept hoping the next week would be better, that Dana would lighten up. But she never did. By Friday, I was exhausted. I stayed late again, finishing edits on a campaign presentation Dana had assigned. Last minute. My eyes stung from staring at the screen for hours. As I printed the last page, Dana's voice cut across the room. "Levi, why are these graphs inconsistent with the template I sent you yesterday?" I froze. Inconsistent. I had everything. Harper came over, gently nudging me aside to speak first. "Dana, I think Levi aligned it perfectly with the template. Maybe there's a misunderstanding." Dana's eyes narrowed. "Thank you for trying, Harper, but I'll handle this." Then, turning back to me, she said, "Fix it by morning." I expect perfection. I wanted to scream. I wanted to quit. I wanted to shake her until she realized this wasn't just a job, this was a livelihood we were talking about. But I didn't. Not yet. He left the office late that night, my hands shaking. From stress and exhaustion, Harper stayed late too. She walked beside me when she said softly, "You can't keep doing this to yourself. Something's got to give." I didn't answer. I didn't know what to say. I just kept walking, the city lights blurring, as if mocking me, showing me that no matter how fast I ran, I couldn't escape Dana's shadow. The weekend felt like I lasted just a couple hours, and that next Monday, the pattern continued. Dana assigned another impossible task: create a full social media strategy for a new client, a campaign launch in 3 days. She even added, "And Levi, don't let me see any mistakes this time." I sat at my desk, staring at the blank template. She had emailed. My mind raced with strategies, content calendars, and analytics. I knew that Harper would help, but even with her support, the volume was insane. She slid into the seat beside me. "I'll help you break this down," she said calmly. "We'll split the workload." I felt a small spark of hope. For the first time in days, I felt like maybe I wouldn't completely collapse under Dana's demands. We worked through the morning, mapping out content, deadlines, and posting schedules. By lunchtime, the foundation was set. By evening, we had a complete draft. I leaned back in my chair, exhausted but satisfied. Then Dana walked in. "Levi." "Harper," she began, her eyes scanning the work we had done. "This is a start. But you're missing a few key components I explicitly outlined in the brief. Fix it immediately." I opened my mouth to explain, but Harper gave me a look that said, "Let me handle this." She calmly walked Dana through each component we had included, emphasizing how we had met every requirement, and even added extra suggestions for engagement. Dana's lips pursed, and for a moment, I thought she might acknowledge our effort. But instead, she said, "I'll review this overnight. I expect revisions by tomorrow morning. And Levi, make sure you personally oversee the corrections." Her words hit me like a punch. She had turned the teamwork we had accomplished into my sole responsibility. Knowing full well the hours it would take to fix any minor issues she hadn't even specified that night, I sat at my kitchen table, working on revisions. My hands ached, my head throbbed, and my patience was gone. Harper called me, checking in. "You okay?" She asked. "Not really," I admitted. "I don't even know why I bother sometimes. Nothing I do is good enough." "You're human," she said softly. "She's the problem, not you. And you're not alone. I've got your back." Her support meant more than she probably realized. But even so, I couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped. Every day felt like walking a tightrope over a pit of sharks. Every mistake, even the smallest, was a feast for Danabai. Wednesday, the revisions were done. I delivered them to Dana, expecting at least a nod of approval. Instead, she called me into her office again. "Levi," she said, sitting behind her desk with a calm that screamed control, "this is better. But it's still not perfect. And it won't be, unless you learn to anticipate my expectations before I even voice them." I swallowed hard. "Anticipate your expectations?" "Yes," she said, smiling slightly. "That's what separates great employees from the rest." "Can you do that?" I wanted to answer honestly that no, I can't. Nobody can. But I didn't. I nodded instead, feeling my soul shrank under the weight of her perfectionism. Harper saw the change in me immediately. During a late-night snack break, she leaned across the table. "Levi, you need a plan. This isn't sustainable. If you keep going like this, Dana will burn you out completely. You need leverage." I frowned. Leverage? How do you get leverage over someone who's untouchable? Harper's eyes sparkled with determination. "You fight smart. Not against her directly, against the system she relies on. She can't be everywhere at once, and she underestimates you. That's our advantage. For the first time, a small seed of hope planted itself in my mind. Maybe I didn't have to keep suffering. Maybe there was a way out, and a way to finally... When after that late-night conversation with Harper, I couldn't stop thinking about her words. Fight smart. Not against her directly, against the system she relies on. At first, I wasn't sure what she meant, but over the next few days, as Dana piled on impossible projects and micromanaged everything, I started noticing patterns. Dana thrived on control. Yes, but she also thrived on appearances. Her superiors expected perfection from our team, and she wanted everyone to believe she could deliver it flawlessly. But perfection, it turned out, was a mask she couldn't maintain alone. There were cracks everywhere. If you knew where to look, I started documenting everything. Deadlines she imposed without notice, projects that contradicted earlier instructions, emails where she publicly praised Harper but criticized me for the same work. Harper helped me keep a clear record, taking notes in her own meticulous way. The more I tracked, the more I realized how her perfect image relied on our constant labor. Without us, she had nothing to show. An afternoon, Dana assigned me to revise a campaign proposal that had already been approved by the client. They didn't understand the vision, she said, smirking as if the mistake was mine. Fix it, and make it impressive. You can't disappoint me again. I stared at the document, my chest tight. But instead of panicking, I glanced at Harper. She raised an eyebrow, silently saying, "This is it." The moment to test the system, I drafted a plan. If I could highlight Dana's contradictory instructions in a professional way while still meeting her deadlines, I could demonstrate to our higher-ups that she was creating unnecessary chaos. It was risky, but Harper agreed it was worth trying. That night, we stayed late again, revising the proposal. But this time, we included careful notes showing how previous instructions conflicted, how the original plan had been perfectly valid, and how our revisions improved it efficiently. Every comment was factual, professional, and undeniable. The next morning, I delivered the proposal to Dana. She skimmed it, eyes narrowing. "Interesting," she said slowly. "But why did you make these changes?" I took a deep breath. "Followed your notes, Dana, but I also tried to clarify the original instructions that conflicted. I wanted to make sure the client gets a cohesive message." Dana's lips pressed into a thin line. "I see," she said. "Well, it's acceptable. But you're still responsible for any client complaints." I nodded, keeping my calm. "Harper?" gave me a small smile from across the office. One step at a time. Later that day, I sent a copy of the proposal and the notes to our department head, highlighting the improvements without directly criticizing Dana. The goal wasn't to get her in trouble, it was to show the results of proper documentation and professional execution over the next week. The dynamic began to shift subtly. Dana's constant scrutiny still existed, but with every documented improvement I made, her grip loosened slightly. I started feeling a sense of control I hadn't had in months. Harper and I developed a system. I handled the tasks, but we both maintained meticulous records. E-myth, revisions, approvals, everything. By keeping the facts clear, we could navigate Dana's whims without being crushed by them. It was exhausting, yes, but we were finally fighting back in a smart way then. One morning, Dana handed me a new assignment, a major campaign launch with a client that could make or break our firm's reputation. She gave me a tight deadline and no additional resources. Her tone was sharp, almost gleeful. "I expect perfection, Levi. And remember, you're accountable for every tiny detail." I felt my chest tighten. But instead of dread, a strange clarity washed over me. This was Our chance. The perfect storm. Harper and I spent the next 48 hours working tirelessly, but now, with a strategy. Every step was documented, every instruction verified. Every email copied by the time the campaign was ready. We had a rock-solid portfolio of work, complete with evidence of Dana's unreasonable demands and our solutions. I delivered it to her. With confidence, her approval was curt but given. But I also sent a version to the department head, highlighting the efficiency, professionalism, and documented work. It was a gamble. If Dana noticed, she'd likely explode. But if she didn't, the truth would be visible to her. Up's tension in the office skyrocketed over the next few days. Dana sensed that something had shifted, though she didn't know what. She started micromanaging more aggressively, trying to regain her control, but every time she did, our documentation kept her in check. One morning, she called me into her office. "Levi," she said, voice sweet but sharp, "I noticed you're taking initiative on some of these campaigns. I need you to remember your place. You're here to follow instructions, not reinterpret them." I sat down calmly. "I understand, Dana. I just wanted to make sure the work is clear and efficient for the team and the client." Her smile was tight and forced. "Just don't overstep, okay?" I left her office and found Harper at her desk, silently giving me a thumbs up. We both knew the battle was far from over, but momentum was on our side. Over the next week, Dana's demands escalated to almost absurd levels. She assigned overlapping deadlines, contradictory edits, and last-minute client requests. But, with each challenge, Harper and I responded strategically. We anticipated her contradictions, documented everything, and presented solutions that were professional and undeniable. The breaking point came during a major client presentation. Dana insisted on taking the lead, but the slides were incomplete and disorganized because of her last-minute changes. I had meticulously prepared an alternative version, fully polished and ready. Harper whispered, "It's time." During the presentation, I calmly suggested using the revised slides. Dana hesitated, then reluctantly agreed. The presentation went flawlessly. The client was impressed, the data was clear, and for the first time, Dana had to acknowledge someone else's expertise in front of higher-ups. Afterward, in the empty conference room, Harper leaned toward me. "We did it. That was huge." I nodded, though part of me was wary. Dana would retaliate. She always did. But this time, we were prepared. Over the following days, our careful documentation and strategic actions began to have an effect. Dana's credibility started to wobble with the department heads. The more she tried to micromanage, the more evidence there was that her methods were causing unnecessary stress and inefficiency. Finally realized what Harper had meant about leverage. We weren't just surviving her cruelty, we were turning it into proof of our competence and her overreach. The system was on our side, and we were playing it smart. By the end of the week, Dana's grip was slipping. And for the first time, I felt like I wasn't just a victim, I was part of the solution. By the following Monday, I knew Dana was aware something had shifted. Her once commanding presence in the office felt off. Tighter, shorter, like she was trying to maintain control, but couldn't quite grasp it anymore. Every instruction she gave was monitored, verified, and documented by Harper and me. Leaving her little room to manipulate or intimidate that morning, Dana called me into her office again. The office smelled faintly of coffee and her usual floral perfume. However, today, the energy felt different. "Levi, I noticed your methods," she began, her tone carefully measured. "You've been very proactive. I appreciate it." I blinked. Appreciation from Dana. It sounded like a trap. But I kept my tone neutral. "Thank you." I'm just trying to keep everything aligned with client expectations and internal standards. Her eyes flicked to the stack of files on my desk, the documentation we'd accumulated over weeks. For a moment, I thought she might explode, but instead, she forced a smile. Just remember to keep it professional. I left, heart racing, realizing this was our moment. Harper and I didn't need confrontation, we needed clarity. The evidence we had: bill to mails, timelines, detailed records of contradictory instructions, was undeniable. And Dana, brilliant as she was at intimidation, had underestimated our ability to remain calm and strategic under pressure. We decided it was time to escalate formally. I scheduled a meeting with our department head, presenting the documentation in a professional, factual manner. Harper attended with me, supporting every point with additional records. We didn't insult Dana, we didn't dramatize. Every fact spoke for itself. The meeting was intense. Our department head, a usually reserved and analytical person, listened carefully. At the end, he leaned back and said, "I've noticed some inconsistencies in management style here. I'm going to review this further. Thank you for bringing it to my attention." We walked out of the office in silence. Harper gave me a small smile. We've done it. The system is working. For the next few days, Dana tried to tighten control, but every time she did, our documentation countered her. Even small contradictions were noted, and any attempt to single us out for blame was now carefully recorded. She was still a formidable presence, but the fear she relied on no longer held power over us. Then came the client presentation that would solidify everything. Dana was expected to lead again, but the slides she had prepared were confusing, contradictory, and incomplete. Harper nudged me during the pre-meeting run-through. "This is it," she whispered. "Time to shine." During the presentation, I calmly suggested using the revised slides we had prepared, citing efficiency, clarity, and client satisfaction. Dana hesitated, looking around the room. No one spoke. Then, she reluctantly agreed. The presentation went flawlessly, the same as it had the last time we used this maneuver. The clients were impressed, the data clear, and the proposals actionable. And once again, Dana had to acknowledge someone else's expertise in front of the higher-ups. Walking back to my desk, Harper leaned close. "Levi, we are actually doing it. She's losing grip, and it's all because of us." I nodded, relief washing over me. I can't believe it. It's actually working. The week after the presentation, the office buzzed differently. Dana was still there, still formidable, but her aura of invincibility had cracked. Our department head called Dana into a private meeting. Rumors floated. There would be management restructuring, more oversight, and, for the first time, consequences. For reckless demands, Harper and I exchanged quiet smiles at our desks. We had survived, and more than that, we had strategically turned the tables without creating unnecessary conflict. The difference now was clear. Dana's control had limits, and we knew exactly how to work within and around them. Then came an email that solidified our victory. The department head praised both of us for the recent campaigns, highlighting professionalism, strategic thinking, and leadership under pressure. Dana was mentioned only as part of the team, without the usual intimidation or credit hogging. It was subtle, but the point was clear. Our efforts had been recognized. Our competence undeniable. The sense of relief was incredible. Weeks of stress, late nights, and relentless pressure had culminated in something tangible. Dana's dominance was no longer absolute. I could breathe again. Harper and I could work without fear of constant belittlement, and best of all, we had done it on our own terms. One afternoon, Harper and I sat outside for lunch, the city buzzing around us. "Can you believe it?" she said, shaking her head. It feels like a completely different office now. I smiled. Yeah. But it's more than that. It feels like we finally have control over our own work lives. That was insane, but we did it. We really did it. She grinned. And we didn't even have to fight dirty. Nope, I said. Professionalism wins. Who knew? Over the next few weeks, our office environment gradually improved. Dana's micromanagement became less suffocating as upper management implemented stricter oversight. Team morale improved, and the stress that had dominated my life finally eased. Harper and I continued collaborating closely. Our partnership stronger than ever. By the time the next major project rolled around, I was ready. Not just to survive, but to excel, confident in my skills, my judgment, and the strength of having Harper in my corner. And while Dana remained a presence, her aura of fear had faded. She was no longer a monster that I couldn't face. A challenge I had learned to navigate. Sitting at my desk one evening, I leaned back and thought about the past months. I had almost quit. I almost let her win. But instead, I found leverage, built strategy, and emerged stronger. And best of all, I wasn't alone. Harper had been my anchor, my collaborator, and my voice of reason. Together, we turned an impossible situation into a victory, not just over a demanding boss, but over fear, doubt, and exhaustion. It had been brutal. It had been frustrating. It had been extreme. But it had been worth it, because sometimes the most satisfying victories aren't loud or flashy. They're quiet, strategic, and earned through patience, intelligence, and a refusal to let fear dictate your life.